Okay, we are continuing our read of A to Z's of Horror. This week is B for Beelzebub, and he talks about The Exorcist, which is pretty cool. And so I'm going to take the opportunity to talk about this really awesome makeup palette that I got. I am wearing it, but I'm wearing also the ridiculous lashes that go with it, or that I also ordered. I love it so much. I think these are going to be my new burlesque lashes. Yeah, I'm still learning how to work with a palette that doesn't give you directions because I'm terrible at makeup. So that's the makeup. And it is from Bad and Bruja Lashes, which I have been stalking them for like a minute and finally was like, you know what, I just need to go ahead and buy this makeup and I will learn as I go. And that's what I've been doing. I'm pretty happy with it. So this week is B for Beelzebub. We're going to talk about The Exorcist. Yeah. B for Beelzebub. There's Reagan's eyes. That's pretty darn cool. Okay, side. My janitors are going crazy wiping up the vomit, an American theater manager about The Exorcist. A Catholic priest has successfully freed 14-year-old Mount Rainier MD boy of reported possession by the devil here early this year. It was disclosed today. The priest's name was withheld by the National Catholic Welfare Conference. The ritual of exorcism, driving out the satanic influence, however, can only be employed with the permission of the Archbishop. The Evening Star, 19 August 1949. The best or worst thing about being human is that the story doesn't necessarily end with us. Horror believes absolutely in strange, unknowable dark gods and demons, agents of chaos who must never be forgotten or domesticated or mocked because in the end, they are that dark part of ourselves which we fear to embrace. And as anyone who has laughed at a demon will tell you, when they show their teeth, they can be vicious beyond all our imaginings. When the film The Exorcist was released in 1973, the devil had been dormant for some while. For most people, satanic forces have been confined to Samantha's cute relatives and TV's Bewitched. What writer William Peter Blatty and director William Friedkin understood is that the dark gods do exist. Very dark gods indeed. The inspiration for the original novel dates back to when Blatty was at Georgetown University, Washington. There he read a local newspaper accounts of an exorcism involving a 14-year-old boy in Mount Rainier, Maryland in 1949. In 1970, the author, who had once considered becoming a Jesuit and entering the priesthood, began researching incidents of possessions and demonology, ultimately basing his book on an earlier exorcism carried out in Erling, Iowa in 1928, as well as the Mount Rainier episode and various historical cases dating back to the Bible. The book was almost immediately caused controversy when it was published by Harper & Row in 1971, remaining for 55 consecutive weeks in the bestseller charts, and Blatty sold the film rights to Warner Brothers for a reported $641,000. The film began shooting on 14 August 1972 in a hospital on Welfare Island, New York. 16 months and $10 million later, it opened in 20 key American cities on Boxing Day 1973. Neither producer, screenwriter Blatty nor director Friedkin were prepared for the repercussions. It's what we would call today a docudrama, explains Friedkin, with a great deal of it based on whatever we could discover about the original case. The novel that Bill Blatty wrote is based on a possible true case of demonic possession. There are more things in heaven and earth than we can understand or appreciate or explain, and I think that is true of The Exorcist. And then, side note, Friedkin's film The Exorcist appeared and became a social phenomenon in itself. Lines stretched around the block in every major city where it played, and even in towns which normally rolled up their sidewalks promptly at 7:30, midnight shows were scheduled. Stephen King. So we got pictures here. And I'm just going to assume that everyone has seen The Exorcist. The film soon broke attendance records in most movie theaters, and people stood in line for more than 4 hours to see it. In Washington, D.C., the USA District Attorney's Office overruled the rating from the MPAA and banned anyone under 17 from seeing the film, while in Boston it received an X rating. John Cairns was in the audience on the opening night of The Exorcist. Have you had this naive, good little child that is taken over by the devil, he recalls. Here you had in the audience this teenage kid from Brooklyn, New York, who had done some pretty bad things in his life. And I was thinking, if this could happen to her, then it certainly could happen to me. One of the women 2 rows behind me literally fainted. She screamed and fainted. They must have been prepared for this because people came rushing in from the back of the theater, picked this woman up, and took her right out. Across America, people left screenings in a distressed condition. Heart attacks and at least 1 miscarriage were reported, while in Berkeley, California, a man attacked the screen attempting to kill the demon. The number of people seeking psychiatric help increased, church attendance began to rise dramatically, and violence broke out at many screenings. I just never anticipated the dementia that grew up around the experience of reading the book or seeing the film, recalls author Blatty. And the closest I've been able to come to explaining it is that there is a deep-seated belief in the core of many people that a malevolent and intelligent force of evil personified does exist. Referring back to the original case that The Exorcist is predominantly based on, the Reverend Thomas Birmingham S.J., who acted as one of several technical advisors in the film, as well as appearing in a small role, remembers. It was a true possession, by which I mean very specifically that Satan had taken over the body of that child and controlled her movements and her voice. After the release of the film, says Blatty, I remember that Billy Graham stated in a sermon that there was a power in the film itself that could not be quantified, could not be identified. There was an X factor in that film that was evil and dangerous. The second time I saw the film was in Rome, says the Reverend Birmingham, with all these bishops and a cardinal or 2. They were enraptured by it, and they could be very critical of anything they didn't believe in. Blatty agrees. The Pope did make a statement shortly after the release of The Exorcist, reaffirming the Church's position on the existence of Satan as a supreme and intelligent force of evil. I'm sure that had something to do with The Exorcist. Academy Award-winning character actress Mercedes McCambridge is a little more skeptical about some of the reports of mass hysteria that greeted the film when it was initially released. The people who said they had to go into therapy, that they had to go to their confessor, had to run and hide or take medication or vomit explosively, I think they brought those neuroses into the theater with them. They didn't pick them up from the screen. Special effects couldn't do that unless the receptivity was there. Aside, The Exorcist, U.S. Iraq, 1973, director William Friedkin with Ellen Burstyn, Max von Sydow, Lee J. Cobb, Kitty Wynn, Jack McGowan, Jason Miller, Linda Blair, Warner Brothers Color. William Friedkin's classic adaptation of William Peter Blatty's best-selling novel caused a storm of controversy when originally released. When the body of an apparently normal 12-year-old girl, Blair, is dominated by an ancient demon, only an aged exorcist, von Sydow, and a priest who questions of his own faith, Miller had the power to stand against it. The opening desert scenes are nicely atmospheric, but only with the climactic possession exorcism does the film truly achieve its potential as one of the most frightening horror movies ever made. The shooting was reportedly plagued with problems. Actor McGowan died during production. The British censor subsequently cut the scene of Reagan masturbating with a crucifix, and despite 10 nominations, the film only won Oscars for Best Screenplay and Best Sound. Impressive makeup effects created by Dick Smith, S.J. Sequels, Exorcist II, The Heretic, Exorcist III. Quote, I made the film because it was a good story. I never thought of what psychological effect it would have on anyone. William Friedkin. Quote, when The Exorcist first came out, people were saying it will ruin your life if you see this movie. How all these people saw it and killed themselves right afterwards or were put into insane asylums. The National Enquirer was just filled with stories like, I saw The Exorcist and shot myself, or I saw The Exorcist and gave up God. There was a reason why it was blowing people's minds. If you just made it, it would blow people's minds today in pretty much the same way. Quentin Tarantino. And then we have opposite picture, attempting to drive out the demon in The Exorcist. Cambridge, whose movie credits include All the King's Men, Giant, and Suddenly Last Summer, provided the voice of the demon, Pazuzu, with possessed 12-year-old Reagan, Linda Blair, in The Exorcist. My agent called and said that there was a Hollywood director who wanted to call me, and I said, what do they want with me? And he said, well, Mr. Friedkin believes, and these were his words, that you're the only person on the face of the earth who could do justice on the part of the demon. Well, it was a double-edged sword. I didn't want to play any devil. I'm an Irish Catholic. But on the other hand, if I was the only one in the world who could do it, my duty was to fall in love and understand and have compassion for the fallen prince of heaven. I had to become an entity, not just a voice. It drives me crazy when people say, you were the voice in The Exorcist. I tried very hard to create a character, a demon, Lucifer. McCambridge originally claimed that director Friedkin promised her screen credit, then reneged on the deal. When she issued a lawsuit claiming that if there was any horror in The Exorcism, it was me, Warner Brothers' legal department quickly gave her the acknowledgement she wanted. The director pointed out that her contract did not call for a credit and that the demon's voice was created through a variety of techniques. However, he did admit that the actress went to extreme measures to record her dialogue. She said, "I haven't had a drink for 25 years, and I've been off cigarettes for 10 years, he recalls. But if you let me drink some whiskey and if I start smoking, then you will find weird things happening with my voice." And then she said, "Let me put some raw eggs down my throat with the whiskey and cigarettes. Let me have my priest here. Let's see what happens." Then she said, "Why don't you tie me to the chair? And why don't you put me through some kind of physical torture?" Well, which we did. They tore a sheet up and they restrained me, adds McCambridge. My hands, my feet, my neck. I did a number of things in addition to the demon voice just to grab the audience's attention at certain places, continues Friedkin. They had conducted an exorcism in Rome and the Vatican, and they made a very crude recording of it. All of a sudden, across this tape would come these blood-curdling screams of agony that were coming out of something that did not sound human, so I mixed that into the soundtrack as well. Side. I would be opening myself up to satanic forces. I think we are dealing with a very dangerous and very strange situation. I don't believe believers can be possessed by the devil. Reverend Billy Graham on The Exorcist. Quote, "There were more crimes committed in the name of the Bible than were ever committed because somebody watched The Exorcist too many times." Robert Englund. Quote, "The Exorcist, by the way, is definitely a horror movie. You can't possibly call it anything else. I haven't seen it, and I have no desire to see it. I don't say that I disapprove of it. It's just that I have no particularly desire to see the possession of a very young child with her using that kind of language and doing those sort of things." Christopher Lee. We get our pictures. And then here's a poster for Exorcist 2, which we still don't own because I can't find it anywhere. So if anyone happens to find it on VHS, please let me know. Specifically VHS, so that way it matches everything else. We do have 3. Ron Nagel, who helped create the special sound effects of the film, picks up the story. There were certain key sounds that worked subliminally. Sorry, I can't speak. He explains, when they occurred, you would know that something else was going to be happening, that you were supposed to feel a certain thing. All these sounds were augmented and layered with combinations of sound. Nothing was literal. It was just to have bed shaking and you mic it. That's not enough. I went out with a tape recorder to every screwy place I could think of. I went to the slaughterhouse where they were killing pigs. These pigs knew they were going to get it, so their fear was real. I got a lot of stuff that way. Although for a great deal of the film, the soundtrack was loud and clangy and disturbing, I would also take it down to a whisper, and then very often I would go to absolutely dead silence. That contrast kind of enhanced the idea of light and dark and good and evil. One of the most disturbing aspects of the demon's voice was the string of profanities that emanated from the possessed Reagan's lips. So many people would say, "Oh, how could you possibly talk like that?" recalls McCambridge. "I mean, some of the language you used in that film. Well, come on, that was the devil, not Billy Graham. He talked like the devil would talk." It's one of the influences in my life, she continues, that teaches me the broad canvas of every human being is. I am half demonic as Satan never was. If it's in me, it's in everybody. No one is without it. It is alarming sometimes to think of that. I believe I can live with the devil in me, but I'm not sure if I can live with the people who want to control the devil in me. Somebody told me that a horror magazine ran a contest of the 40 scariest movies of all time, recalls actress Ellen Burstyn, who portrayed Reagan's mother in the film. And the results of the contest were that of the first 39 places were The Exorcist. I think it's the scariest movie because it's not so far-fetched, she continues. It does seem within the realm of possibility. It is like something rising up from the dark sea inside. It's a very cold, old fear. I have no doubt The Exorcist moved people very profoundly, says William Friedkin. There's always an attempt to try and label and diffuse the impact of something that moves us deeply. Very few people really want to accept the stuff that is going on. There is a kind of horror of unknowable phenomenon. It's easier to call it a horror film. Quote, with Mercedes McCambridge doing sterling work in the demon's hoarsely mocking voice, the film does build up a fair tension. Monthly Film Bulletin, 1974. And then this picture above says, William Friedkin left confers with William Peter Blatty behind the scenes of The Exorcist. And then here's Mercedes McCambridge at the premiere. And that is the entry on The Exorcist. Which is crazy. I actually still haven't seen 2. But we did watch 3 for Joe Bob a few seasons ago, and that was really, really fun. which if you haven't seen that episode of Joe Bob, you should watch it. It's pretty darn interesting. He talks about William Peter Blatty, about his Catholicism, and talks about, 3, because 3 was about him trying to take back his story because of his writing style. And then also on Shudder is that Cursed Films episode about The Exorcist, which is pretty darn interesting as well. And it goes into all of the mishaps that happened on set, and it was insane. And that's pretty new. Like, that came out last year, that documentary. So it's going to have pretty up-to-date information. So that is B is for Beelzebub. And next week we will do C is for Chaos. Thank you for reading with me. Bye.